Okay, I think I finally got this figured out. When I first started reporting about Jaleayah Davis, I could see that there were patterns. I didn't know Hugh Squier yet. I didn't understand exactly how the pieces fit together. The person I was learning gematria from was just blaming everything on the Illuminati, so I thought, well, okay, somebody's doing this. So I just thought maybe it was the Illuminati. And then Hugh started showing me some Civil War patterns, and then I said, okay, this has something to do with the Civil War, and it does. That's true. And now, with a little more research, we've really put this together. Look what's going on. March 2, 2020. That's 322. You know, that's the skull and bones insignia that they gave to George Bush, because they give skull and bones, which was started by physicians, that insignia, okay, because 9/11 was done on the day that you call an ambulance. So 322, that's not a coincidence. Well, look what just happened within 2 miles of where Jaleayah Davis was murdered on Interstate 77, an 18-wheeler. There's that 81. She was murdered on mile marker 181, an 18-wheeler. You're going to see that number several times. The truck was located near mile marker 183, and of course, 83 is the number for murder. Murder equals 83 in gematria. Now, within 24 hours, look at this truck. Look how it's burned down. Look at how it's just nothing left of it. Within 24 hours, another one was burned down right there by Hugh Squier's. Look at it. It's almost the same thing. It's identical. If you didn't see the mountains in the background, you'd think you were looking at the same truck. Just nothing left. Within 24 hours of each other, both on the interstate. Truck fires 2 miles from Jaleayah Davis's murder on the same interstate highway as where she was murdered. The Parkersburg News and Sentinel reports news on Jaleayah Davis on Pi days. Now, this is 228, while the identical fire burns a truck to the ground near Hugh the day before on 227, showing they're connected. 22 divided by 7 is pi. The newspaper reported Jaleayah's murder on the 227th day of the year and on March 14, which is, of course, 314 or pi. These trucks burned to the ground both on interstate highways within 24 hours of each other. Remember, rule of Colel, one number apart means the same thing. There's the newspaper article. All right. August 15 is the 227th day of the year. There remains 138 days left in this year, just like there are 308 days remaining in the year on November 27, 2020. See, 38 again. That's the murder number, 38. It's like we were saying up here, okay? 83, you know? 83 and 38. Murder equals 38 and 83. Obviously, they're making a pretty obvious point. Here was the other News and Sentinel article. This was shown on the internet, so you got this date, but they were referring to the original story, and you can barely see it behind the scribble, so that's 314 right there. Okay, 314:13 is pi, both forward and backward. 314 or backwards 314. Incidentally, you might notice that computer programmer Terry Davis, like Jaleayah Davis, died on 8/11/18, which is 8/11, both forward and backwards. But we're not really going to get into him. He's not really integral to this story, other than the fact that his name is Davis. But Jaleayah Davis, again, mile marker 181, and that's why he was killed, I think, referring to this other bigger picture in this Whitey Bulger case. Now let's look at the famous gangster Whitey Bulger. His friend, Stephen Fleming, had a girlfriend named Deborah Davis. And Bulger and Fleming murdered Deborah Davis and Michelle Davis, and guess which year she was murdered? 1981. Does it sound like mile marker 181 by any chance? Now, Whitey Bulger was arrested November 1st, 2011. I got a little, ignore this little part there. I should have deleted that. Bulger was murdered the same day he arrived by prisoners when he was transferred later to this prison. I should have corrected sentences. Sorry about that, folks. I'll go back and fix it on the blog here. But he was transferred in 2018 to the prison in Hazleton, West Virginia. The day that he arrived, he was murdered the same day by prisoners who had filled their socks full of rocks, and some reports say full of padlocks. And they beat Whitey Bulger to death with the socks full of rocks or padlocks. It's no surprise that Hazleton's family is in Hugh's family cemetery, right here, Charlotte A. Hazleton Harris. Hazleton refers to the maiden name. Now, Jaleayah Davis was murdered in West Virginia, the same state that Bulger was murdered. Jaleayah's murder occurred only 19 days after the arrest of Whitey Bulger. Whitey was murdered on October 30, 2018. Isn't it interesting that many of the people surrounding the Jaleayah Davis murder were police and that Whitey was killed in a prison? Now let's look at the date when Charlotte Hazleton died. Oh, 2/28. 2/28. 2/27 and 2/28. That's when the trucks are burning down. 2/27 and 2/28. Still think this is just all coincidence? How is that possible? Look at the year, 1877. Jaleayah Davis was murdered on mile marker 181, 18, on Interstate 77. In 1975, Whitey Bulger sold a car to Hugh Squier the same day that Jimmy Hoffa was murdered. The FBI detained Hugh Squier for the murder of Jimmy Hoffa, believing that Hugh might be hiding Hoffa in the trunk of the car that he just bought from the famous mobster. Is it possible that Whitey was about to spill the beans about what really happened to Hoffa and they murdered him for it at Hazleton to mark Hugh Squier? Oh, Hugh's wife, Victoria Milan, was murdered on a Civil War battlefield. Who was the president of the Confederacy? Jefferson Davis. And when did this happen? She was murdered October 31st, 2011. 1 day before the arrest of Whitey Bulger, and 1 year and 7 days to the day, within 1 day of 7 years to the day of Whitey's murder. Hugh Squier is the truth of Jimmy Hoffa, JFK, and 9/11. This isn't coincidence, folks. This is what Jaleayah Davis's murder was truly about. It took a while to finally put all the pieces together, but here they are still today. It's just within the last few days. This is right here where Hugh lives, and this is right here where Jaleayah Davis was murdered. Trucks burned out. Oh, and on the day that Jimmy Hoffa was, when he was murdered, and Hugh Squier was detained by the FBI for his murder, guess what? Hugh's trucks, for bottom line, were dynamited that day. Oh, does that remind you of anything? Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.